People have come up with various ways to deal with prostitution, but apart from two, they are all just obviously wrong. For example, criminalising prostitutes has got to be one of the worst ideas ever, and herding them into legalised state-run brothels is not far behind. So the two ideas which are worth considering are 1. Criminalising the punters, but not the prostitutes, as they have done in Sweden since 1999, or 2. Decriminalising the whole thing, which is sort of what New Zealand has done since 2003. In my opinion, the Swedish model is a great idea, whereas decriminalisation turns out to be a non-starter when you give it a bit of thought. But the good thing is that both models have now been in existence for several years, so it should be possible to use those real-world experiences to subject the claims made by both systems to a fairly rigorous, fact-based analysis. And that's what I'm going to do in this series of videos. Obviously I'm starting off with a preference for the Swedish model, but I think I'm enough of a liberal to nevertheless give both sides a fair shake when it comes to being objective about the facts. So first let's see what claims each system is actually making. The Swedish model would claim to be a simple and consistent system based on the idea that prostitution is incompatible with gender equality. So it seeks to abolish prostitution, and to do this it criminalises the people who are actually abusing their power and being antisocial, i.e. the punters. It also sees the legislation as helping to boost a social norm which says that it's wrong to use people as sex objects. Decriminalisation, which is what they have in New Zealand, sort of, essentially says that society, in the form of the law, should not have an opinion about the act of prostitution, which it characterises as two mature adults freely entering into a financial contract in the context of a free market system. The idea is that individuals should be free to decide for themselves how they want to sell their bodies, which is seen as a value-free activity, the same as waxing someone's car or making them a coffee. They claim that if prostitution was seen as being no different from any other job, this would make life better for the prostitutes by removing the stigma associated with what they do. They could also, in theory, set up their own self-organised co-ops in which they'd be better able to access healthcare or police protection. Okay, well let's start off by looking at how both systems would affect the prostitutes who carried on working in ways which were outside the accepted system. In Sweden this would cover all forms of prostitution, with one of the fears being that the women would end up working alone so as to avoid their punters being detected, and thus they would be even more vulnerable to abuse. Equally though, while we're on the subject of reducing the most harmful kinds of prostitution, street prostitution is an obvious example of a bad situation, and it's universally agreed that the Swedish model has drastically reduced the number of women working on the streets. The available research suggests that they have not just moved indoors, although that in itself would be an improvement for the women, but that the overall number of prostitutes has fallen. However, it's never easy to get totally accurate figures for these kind of indoor activities, and I'll be going into that subject in more detail later in the series. As regards New Zealand, decriminalisation has produced a two-tier system where the well-organised prostitutes are, ideally at least, working in small, self-organised co-ops which have various civilised conditions such as compulsory condom use. These women are, however, not willing to service the kind of punters who want what I'll describe as gonzo sex, e.g. without condoms, bouncers, etc. So punters like that will obviously give rise to an underground sector filled by women who are desperate enough to service their demands. I would suggest that this underground sector will probably be about the same size as it was before decriminalisation, with the more civilised sector simply providing a new and additional space which men who might have previously been turned off by the seedy reality of paying for sex will feel more comfortable about using. Thus the overall effect of decrim would be to increase the size of the sex industry without changing the amount or severity of the underground activity. However, as we have a version of decrim in existence in New Zealand, it should, hopefully, be possible to get some kind of evidence on how it has actually played out, rather than just being forced to argue from anecdotes and theoretical analysis. So in a future video, that is exactly what I will be looking at.